Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are talking King of 2 Mile, guys. I am super excited to have Richie on today. He's been doing some amazing things out there in the long range precision game. Richie, how you doing this morning?
Doing well. How are you?
Just living my best life, you know. Woke up a couple hours ago, got a lot done, and now we're doing the podcast. So I'm excited. Um, I want to definitely talk about what you've been doing in King of 2 Mile. But before we get there, why don't we talk a little bit about sort of your background in shooting? I know we talked a little bit about that. You sent some stuff over. But I think a lot of people sort of really appreciate and understand, where you came from, what you've been doing, and where you plan to go, sort of that essence. So can you tell us a little bit about, getting into shooting for you?
Where I grew up, it's every little boy has a gun in his hand, probably as soon as he can physically hold a gun and shoot. And hunting is something I remember talking about in elementary school, even before being of age, which is 12 years old, my home state, and you had to take classes, etc. Even back then, and it was just something that I don't know if it was necessarily looked at as this is part of becoming a man. Like you and hunting, every that was it. They even shut down school for the first day of our deer season. So
Wow.
the prep time growing up, as far as practicing to shoot, my dad was blue collar. He worked 6 days a week, so 4 or 5 days at the shooting range a year and 50, 100 yard targets because we didn't shoot as far. So seeing that 300-yard target at the range, it's like, oh no, you'll we don't hunt farm fields. We hunt in the woods, so you don't have shots that far. And so
Mhm.
that was kind of a limit, and especially with the weaponry that we had then, you didn't you just didn't shoot far. So as I got older, I started going to different areas and seeing an animal that was, or a target even, that you would think would be 1,000 yards, and it's only a few hundred just because my eyes aren't used to it. That's not
Mhm.
what my dad instilled in me. You don't shoot far, you don't waste ammo, you probably can't hit it. So it just kind of grew very, very slow until I got into the military. And what was very strange is I went to basic training where the infantry goes, and I was not an infantry MOS, which is a job designator, but I was the best shooter. And even as the distances grew and the different weapons from machine guns to grenade launchers, uh, anti tank rockets, it just blossomed. I'm like, man, I thought I loved firearms and shooting, and now I get to use the really cool stuff.
Mhm.
And when it came out that I was the top shooter in our entire battalion, which was about I think it's 1,500 people, they were like, "You missed two targets the entire time of all the training," and we think that you would be better served in the U.S. military if you changed your job and you became infantry and you possibly go to ranger school, sniper school, things like that. But I didn't make that choice. I got kind of I was a little overwhelmed as a 18-year-old kid being asked by some of the senior officers, "Hey, you should really do this," and I just brushed it off as I'm just some country kid who liked shooting, and that was it. But the rest of the military was kind of the same thing. I did a lot of shooting and did a lot of training because I realized that your normal, just across the military, all the different jobs they have in the military, not everybody gets that shooting practice, but we do have to qualify. We're all soldiers at the end of the day. So it took more time. And I think that I saw that there was that basic knowledge and even some fear with folks. Hey, I have to do this or else I could get kicked out of the military because I can't shoot a basic weapon for a basic qualification.
Mhm.
And I think teaching the basics is what was a big milestone to thousands of people I trained. And these are folks from all walks of life. They could have kids in the military, they could be much older than myself, more senior ranked. And you see them pick up a basic M16 and they're jerking the trigger. And they don't have a solid basic double elbow foundation as a rest, or they don't have sandbags or whatever we were using. and you just see them in their basic abilities or lack of. It's like, wow, hey, if you just relax a little bit, just not going to go into all the breathing techniques or anything, but hey, just chill out on your exhale, squeeze the trigger. Let's not just keep jerking the trigger thinking that hey, you're in a panic situation and this is what I need to do to survive. It's ineffective. So I think that trains folks more and more to be collected in the moment from that basic instruction. Now, who knows? They may remember that in the heat of the moment if they're under fire. That hey, squeeze the trigger, don't jerk the trigger. That's probably the most basic firearms instruction that anybody could go through. And you'll do it with my daughter. She gets into a routine where she'll want to shoot fast pace. She thinks the gun's a laser beam. It's not a laser beam. You have your basic mechanics. You have to do these things. And what is the result? You show her a quarter-inch group that she shot and put it on the refrigerator. Then you show her inch and a half group she shot with the same gun, same day, just because she didn't follow those mechanics. So I really do enjoy teaching people because it is a simple thing to do. Shooting is a simple thing to do, and seeing your shot on target. I've seen people never shoot before, and they hit a bullseye or they shoot a tight group, and we just have this major success because the most simple things that we take for granted. Because if you sit and think about how much trigger time you have and how much trigger time I have, it's like wow, that there's so many out there that have pulled the trigger just a few times or jerked the trigger a few times. So I would say that military training and training of others kind of launched into excelling my hunting abilities more, moving around a lot and settling where I did in Virginia. I hit a point where I couldn't, there was nothing on the shelf that was going to satisfy what I needed to do. The shots didn't increase significantly. I'm not some of those YouTubers, even back 15 years ago, where you see guys taking 1,000-yard shots on animals. Um, but I know that I wanted the best accuracy I could find, the most lethal combination as far as cartridge and bullet, and I didn't find that. I just segued into I can design my own things. I can piggyback off something that I've seen and make it better. And that's really where the manufacturing part came in. Was I wanted it to be mine. I wanted to make sure that I knew the ins and outs because I think it's very frustrating for me and my personality if something's not going well. Well, for this, any of this, I know what the root cause is. And I eliminate anything that could be a question or lose sleep over like, well, maybe that chamber's 2,000s deeper than what it should be, or any type of combination of factors that you just don't know the information. I did grow up reloading, even though it was very unsophisticated. I don't know if I mentioned in the email that my dad's sitting there smoking a cigarette, being like, all right, boy, we got to make sure that we have the powder charges right so we can shoot tight groups tomorrow. And now looking back on that, I'm like, I don't know how we didn't burn the house down. And we didn't shoot the tightest groups, but it was half the price of buying a box of bullets. So I think that seeing that to where I'm at now, even though what I do as far as my loading is not extremely sophisticated, it's very simple, but the consistency is key. And I think that there's three key points, maybe four, throughout my loading process. And it doesn't matter if it's a hunting rifle or if it's the biggest competition rifles that we use. It's the consistency, and I'm sure we'll get into that later.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so obviously you touched on a lot of really important stuff there. I do want to take like a little step back and talk about, your military experience. You had this opportunity, which I think is fairly insane that you didn't take it because that's how I grew up. That's what I wanted to do. And through a series of sports injuries, I was not able to join the military. And so when you say like, oh no, I was like you just thought they were messing with you as an 18-year-old or something. Like, oh, that's really surprising. You were, such a qualified shooter that you didn't decide to go that direction.
Yeah, I remember the chief of infantry. I won't say his name. The chief of infantry came up to me, and I almost get goosebumps thinking about it. And it's the first time you see a two-star general, and you're at Fort Benning. You're and guys who are veterans know this. In the early 2000s, you go to Fort Benning as an infantryman, and then the other MOSs they call Fort Jackson. Then it was called Relaxin' Jackson because that's where they sent a lot of the non-combat MOSs. And for him to pull me aside and to talk to me, I'd never really talked to somebody so important, and to hear and see him so in, intense in a way, not like overbearing because I'm a big dude, so it wasn't like he was all up in my face. He was just so sincere and so serious about it that that was intimidating. It's like really you're talking to me about this. It's not. I just never thought something like that would happen coming from a small town. And
Mhm,
so you question it. It's like, well, I understand what you just said to me. I see what happened at all these different ranges because we shot so many different ranges. Like I look at my basic training task sheet and all the things we were graded on, and then I compared it to folks years later, and I'm like, well, I shot at this range. I was in the middle of the woods, and you had targets that were coming from behind a tree, rather than you're shooting at what looks like a driving range for a golf course, and the targets are
mhm,
popping up out of the ground. And I think about those accomplishments, and I'm like, okay, he is serious. And what would my life be like? And coming from a small town and wanting a career that I could take out of the military, that that was just my core foundation. There was nothing that was going to take me away from that, even though I loved the idea of what he was saying. I am a very patriotic person. Um, Pennsylvania, my home state, is known for producing significant amount of veterans through all the wars. So it was hard. It was really just an idea of wow, I could go do all these great things and maybe go to special forces. And I do have a couple special forces buddies now that they know that story in my past, and they did go that route and they did great things, and they look at themselves now and what they do, and they wouldn't change it for the world. They had the greatest experiences.
mhm.
But for me, I still wouldn't change it. There's part of me that would like to see that path, what that would have led to. But I'm still confident in my decision, even as that 18-year-old kid, that I got out of the military and I still have a core profession in information technology that keeps me grounded, and that was what my future was supposed to be.
That's awesome. And so you get out of the military and you start talking about how you did a couple things, right? You're training people, and then you talk about how you get sort of into manufacturing, and then we sort of jump to like where you are now. I don't know how old you are, but I have to imagine that's like at least 30 years somewhere in there, right?
Wow, it's
Yeah.
30. I'm 30 again. Okay. No,
So
I just turned 40 earlier this year, so
okay, so 20-ish years, right, have passed since you were 18, right? Um, Walk us through that sort of 20 years, right? Like when did you start getting into training people and when did you start really getting into deciding that you wanted to create your own stuff around shooting?
the military training part, I remember we were getting ready to go on our first deployment, Operation Iraqi Freedom 3, and that was from 2005 to 2006. So now I'm fully set into the information technology, tactical communications things. And part of your deployment checklist is a battalion sized element, which is about 600 people, is your rifle qualifications. So you have to, like, if you have some sort of, you don't pass a PT test, you don't qualify with your weapon, you have any certain type of medical issues, ladies, if they're pregnant, they can't deploy. So all of those like basic check things. And when it came down to it, I had a tune leader. She was a first lieutenant, and we went to the range one day, and I called 40 out of 40, no problem, and a few of us, and I was done. But I was lower enlisted at that time. I was only a PFC, 19 years old, and her and I had a little bit of a personal rapport, nothing outside of work or anything like that. She was just very personable in the workplace with me, aside from being in front of other people. And she came up to me about halfway through. I was doing some other duty, I was packing up stuff, and they'd realized that only about 10 to 15% of the folks had qualified. And this was her duty that was assigned to her by the battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel, and says, hey, you're going to be in charge of these ranges. You're going to get everybody qualified before we go on deployment. If you don't qualify on your weapon, you're not deployable. That is the most awful statistic you can have as any level of leader. And she came up to me. She's like, "Hey, do you think you could help some of these folks qualify?" And we looked at their zero targets, and there weren't any holes in it. I'm like, "Well, why did you move them from the zero target to the pop-up targets to qualify?" "Oh, we just thought that X, Y, and Z." I said, "Well, we need to get them back over here so we can, like, I can at least see what they're doing." Well, what was supposed to be a 3-day range event for 600 and some people to qualify on various weapons turned into 2 more weeks of 3 days in those weeks, so 6 more days because of how bad everything was. And that was where all the instruction really started, because I remember you could have a woman in her mid 30s, late 30s. She's got 2 kids. She's an administrative type of MOS. She couldn't hit the broadside of the barn. And it's, uh, you just sit there and you go through it like, hey, well, these are your basic foundations. We need to get you steady, breathing, and squeeze the trigger. And seeing that accomplishment on the first few, because we did have a pretty big split of genders when it comes to those types of MOSs. So you had literally all walks of life. You could have some of the senior guys who were in their 40s and just, I don't know how they qualified previously. Maybe they barely did, because at one point in time it was only once a year. And so we got through that. Everybody was qualified, and she was obviously more than grateful because her butt is now not on the chopping block. And I saw that as a, well, if I can just naturally teach this many people to do this, that could be a good thing moving forward. So bringing it into getting out of the military, training several different battalion sized elements down to a specialized group for a little bit more consistent training and longer range training. I I just remember hitting the career field, and my my shooting was just dull. Like I had a handful of rifles, handful of pistols that were just things that a couple of them I had when I was growing up. A couple things that I bought. Then you go and shoot, and you shoot that 1 inch group, and it's like I did everything I possibly could with 6 different boxes of ammo that I could find, and I just wasn't set up for reloading yet. And I knew how to do it because I grew up doing it. But I'm like, man, this is as good as it gets. What happens when I do want to take that 300-yard shot and I pull it an inch, and now how far off it's going to be? And at the time, I didn't know how to calculate that. So I segued into just looking at chamber designs, and I pulled up some things, and I was really hooked on the short mag cartridges because I thought that you could definitely get the most bang for your buck as far as efficiency and powder use and powder volume use. It was also short action. So remember, I'm really tall, so I have the joke that because I like suppressed weapons, if I'm walking through the woods with a slinged weapon, I'm knocking squirrels and owls out of their tree. And so I like short, compact weapons, and I I just stuck with the chamber designs and modified them. And then about I have 20 that I've done pretty much from scratch that I like to put a small claim to fame to, and that I've hunted with, I've competed with, and that's that's where it started, was the chamber designs, and was like, okay, I can do this. I can get my federal firearms license now. I have a few, and just go from there and see what I can create. And it didn't start off so great. I have many barrels that turned into paperweights after just a few shots, and but now I've been open 8 years, and it's it's just at that point of where I'm finally able to just sit on the designs and cruise for the nice custom hunting rifles, competition rifles. I do modify those into some ARs and things like that. But it's a lot of lessons learned. It wasn't easy. I know we only have so much time. It's like, hey, how did you do this? Well, we went straight through all that, and it was all uh, sunshine and rainbows. But
No, I mean, it's really impressive, and it's always so interesting to me. There seems to be, no, I wouldn't say it's like it's typical path, but there's a lot of guys who get really sort of ingrained in shooting, and this is exactly what they start to do their own barrel work. And they start to make these chambers and things like that. And it's always so interesting to me because it's just a whole nother skill set. Shooting is already difficult enough to be hyper competitive at it. And then you add in these other sort of factors that you're working on, and it's so much easier to build, and maybe not for you because you really wanted to understand what you were working with, but for most shooters, it's so much easier to build rifles around what everyone else is already using because there's so much information out there, right? Um, so that must have been an interesting process for you to have to essentially be the person that's doing these load developments and figuring out if this stuff is working.
yeah, and it there was definitely points where you get in no man's land. And even though you take some things that are like a chamber design, it's a piggyback. And one of my biggest heroes in all this, and I will always say it, aside from my dad and getting me started, is Roy Weatherby. And some people kind of get confused at that. But if you look at Roy's chamber designs back in the 40s and what he was doing, and you read some of the old newspaper, like the almost like a newspaper ad of, hey, Weatherby rifles, the flattest shooting, fastest shooting. And I don't think even then people realized how fast that was because they didn't really use chronographs. So
Mhm.
the only data you really had, and just like with any product years ago, is you had whatever was marketed. If it was true or not, who knew? You couldn't, like we can now. Oh, this cartridge is 3,000 feet per second out of the muzzle. Yeah, okay, let's take it to the range and see. Nope, it's like a friend of mine, Dennis, says that we just call that like the dyno numbers of a car. How much horsepower has it got? Because it never comes out to what they say it's going to be. And I understand that there's a certain amount of testings and there's marketing gimmicks, but Roy Weatherby, if you look at his cartridges, and this is a key, and some people know this, maybe some people don't, maybe you do. His amount of free bore in his chambers was and is significantly more than anything else. And a lot of people were like, well, why is that? And if you read anything about the Weatherby cartridges, I think they have enough room and speed to get going. So if you would take, I'll try to put this into so everyone can understand. If you took a 308 Winchester and you had zero free bore and you had a very uh, match chamber, as a lot of people like to call it, but then you take that 308 and you try to load for it, you're going to be severely handicapped in the bullets that you can use. Seating further out, well, you can't really do that because you don't have enough free bore. And if you take something really big and you want it to really excel and not feel pressure until you start hitting case limits, well, then you have to extend that even further. So, just to give you an example, on my 6.5 short mag, I don't shoot anything less than a 250 thousandths free bore. Because compared to like a 6.5 Creedmoor, you're going to be at about 0.125, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. And you can still chamber in Horty's book, I think the 153 grain A tip on that 125 chamber. So whatever a typical is, I'll usually double it. And that way I know I can use any bullet. I can load it out as far as I want to, even if it's single shot, but sometimes you're mag dependent. You got to be able to get it in a magazine. And you can really utilize your case limits at that point. So if it's a 65,000 PSI cartridge, I'll run them about 60, 61 until I feel the nature of that round, the barrel that you're using, whether it's a very slim contour, whether it's a heavy, like the 2 mile guns. 2 mile guns, if you're feeling heavy bolt lift, you're really close because everything is so big. But in the lighter setups, you feel anything, you need to back it off. And that's just kind of my rule of thumb and why the chamber designs, even back then, that Roy Weatherby did, he really paved the way for fast flat shooting rifles, and that's why they still sell a good bit today. I mean, a lot of the designs are still very similar even with their newer things.
So you're sort of going through this process. You're helping people get better. You are, working on your own barrel work, and At what point do you decide that you want to start competing in long range shooting, right? I know you sort of mentioned that you had done, I don't know if this was in conjunction with doing any sort of ELR stuff, but you had mentioned PRS and three gun and things like that. What sort of got that bug moving forward for you to want to do competitive shooting?
So I was anti social media for the longest time. I still kind of am. I mean, I just have a Facebook to spread the word, if you will, of shooting,
Hmm.
and definitely thank a lot of people that rely on it. The companies that I use their products, or we work in conjunction with each other. So the first match I ever went to was I think it was a two gun match, and I went to that. And it's the only difference between two and three guns, is a shotgun. So I didn't have a tactical shotgun at that time, so I did a two gun with I think I did it with an FN and just I don't even, I think it might have been a Diamondback AR, like something really simple. And went there and I shot it. And I think I was middle of the pack. I remember it was, I think it was 150 people, and it was a regional type of just open match. There was no series affiliation. Wasn't like a qualifier or anything like that. It was just a whole bunch of people. Just, hey, here's our two gun form. It's as simple as it could be.
Hmm.
And I drove to, it was like 4 hours away, and I went through it, and my hit percentage was what I thought was pretty good, but my times weren't the greatest. And I had somebody come up to me, and he's said, "Was this your first match?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." And he's like, "You're ex-military, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "I saw what the whenever you negotiated through and you're picking your shots." He's like, "You're taking it from a very classic, safe military perspective because you're expecting return fire. You got to remember that these things aren't shooting back." And I'm like, "Well, I've really never been shot at, just one incident." But it was that mindset, and he just kind of gave me a couple tips. Just I don't even remember the guy's name. We never really talked after that. It was just like, hey, I just noticed these things, but I didn't really have the bug yet. I was like, okay, this is kind of fun. It's not pretend combat. I never really looked at it like that. It's not like a video game. I don't play video games, but I didn't get that severe urge. So like, well, let me do three gun. So I went to three gun at the same place. I think it was 6 months later. I bought just a basic Mossberg 930 extended tube, and with that, I I was just below middle of the pack, and my times were even slower because I'm watching these guys load these shotguns, and I'm like, how do they do that? This was I don't know if you've ever watched like the Mitchell family and just how they flip over and just shove 4 rounds, 4 rounds,
Hmm.
4 rounds. And I'm like, where are all these rounds coming from? And it's amazing. And I realized then I felt like I knew something about shooting. And again, my hit percentage was good. My times weren't great. And I'm watching the reloads. I'm like, I never practiced like reloading a weapon like this. And these people were just fast robots at it. So I don't know if I want to say my confidence level. I guess maybe it is my confidence level. I just like kind of shrank. I was like, man, I have no idea what I'm doing. This is going to take a significant amount of time to figure out how to load all this. And I did. I started practicing more of the loading perspective, standing in a mirror, just like staying on target, changing out a mag, way faster than any military training that I had at the time. But I still didn't have the bug. So I started doing a couple prone matches at the facility I still shoot at now, at Peacemaker National Training Center. And I remember seeing they had a 1,200-yard target, and I thought to myself, well, maybe I need something big, like a big 30. I need a big 30 to do this. And I had one sitting on the shelf that I'd finished, and was very new still. I'm like, well, let me take a 6.5. I think my 6.5 with an 8 tip shooting at 2,900 will be perfect. And it was my very first match prone. Um, the format was simple. You shoot at a target three times, you get more points per shot, and you move on. And it was a lot of shooting. I think it was a 60 shot match, but it
Hmm.
was real low key. It wasn't like two and three gun where it's you have squads of people and everybody's trying to move around to the different stations. There's 10 different stations, and no, we shot a relay which was two or three targets, then the next guy, and you help spot for everybody. And so I just saw that the relaxed atmosphere, I was able to just kind of enjoy it more. And my very first match, I got third place, and I was I think it was a 4-day match, and it was like 125 people, and I only missed a perfect score by 5 points, and that's what kind of really took me to a new elevated level. Is I like fast paced shooting. That's kind of fun. Um, but when you blow through a day, you're tired and you're like, man, I did pretty well. But then you try to remember your shot sequences, and I have a pretty good memory. And I'm thinking, man, I got so busy and wrapped up in all this, I don't remember every detail. And I wasn't running video to kind of go back and see what I did. So I just found it more natural for the long distance at that first match. It was like, hey, I hit every target, but I missed like one first rounder, I think it was. And just the atmosphere was more relaxed. It wasn't hurry up and shoot. It was you could savor it more. That's how I kind of put
Mhm.
it, is the savoring of it. So from there, I think I did one more of those, and somebody in Virginia said, "Hey, why don't you get a little bit of a bigger gun and shoot ELR? There's a match in Southern Virginia." I was like, "Oh, okay. How far do they shoot with that one?" And he's like, "Oh, I think it's a little more than a mile." And I'm thinking, "Well, how many yards is a mile? I don't even know." And that's where it was 3 years ago. I started 3 years ago doing that, and so I went to my first one, and I I took a 7 300 Norma Mag Improved. The chamber design is actually another shop of I work with, and it was a very finicky rifle to get used to. Like, I had to file more shots out of it. So after cleaning, it took 9 shots to get it screwed. But once it did, it was absolutely amazing. So I took that thing and, hey, it shoots 3,200 feet per second with a 195. I can hit a mile no problem. Whatever they throw at me, I'll be fine. And I took a buddy and I said, hey, can you spot for me? So that match, I was like 2 for 5 on the closer targets, and once I got to a mile, it that became daunting. That seeing that, and I had a Burris XTR scope at the time. I didn't have any Night Force stuff like I do now. Um, I remember looking at that target and I was like, man, that's far out there. And they're like, well, it's 2 feet wide. It's not that, like, go ahead and hit it. And I did. But the realization at that distance was my misses, we couldn't see him. And I couldn't see him. Uh, Learned what Mirage was at that point. And hear my spotter say, and this guy, he'd been shooting and training his entire life, but he'd never done that either. So I'm like, Jeff, where are these bullets going? I'm like, I can't be that far off. And it was the second to last target. It was 2,000 yards, and for even for a big seven, that's a bit of a stretch. And I remember firing the first two, no calls, and fired the third one, and I was looking really hard through my scope because I'm like, we got to see where this is going. And I give the comparison to people, and this comes with all sorts of ELR, depending on the cartridge you use and the bullet too. Is I saw that third shot. It was like you flipped a penny in the dirt. And that's what a 190, 195 grain looks at that distance. So that's when I realized I don't have enough gun to be doing this. Or, well, and that's kind of like layman's term. It's not enough gun, it's the bullet size. Yeah, it's going the right speeds and all those other things, but if you can't see your misses, I was like, wow, okay. So I took some time off from that one to kind of reevaluate, and I talked to some other folks in the industry and said, hey, I really want to get into this. And the distinction between 1 and 2 mile was there. And I had some 338s that I was working on. It's 338, 378 Weatherby mag that I blow the throat all the way out, and it's designed just as a 1 mile gun. But I really wanted to do 2 miles. I'm like, well, if I'm going to do this and I'm going to shoot these distances and you go to these matches, which most of them are kind of combined, I want to be able to at least do the heavy gun or light gun, or both. I mean, and so I started looking into the heavy gun, and I know from previous things that I've watched with you, it's like you see the Shy Tech. The Shy Tech is just kind of like the standard for the 2 mile gun. And some people are like, well, I want to have that. It's supposed to be the most accurate, like, big rifle. And I'd seen those. I'd seen 50s. I'd seen various 416s. Didn't see any 408s, and I'll get to that in a little bit because I have some good info about the good old 408. And I wanted to do that because I didn't want to just I felt like if I could do the 2 mile, I could do anything below that when it came to long range shooting. So
So
that's where it really kind of like all started was that one match, and then hey, let's go back to the drawing board before we go forward.
So I do want to talk a bit more about obviously that experience, but for and even for myself, right? Because we've sort of talked about this, and I'm still really diving into the ELR world, and it can be a little confusing, I think, because ELRs. First off, a lot of people don't know what ELR is, right? They don't know where that starts, how far it goes out. Additionally, there's King of 1 Mile, King of 2 Mile. There's like traditional, like they just call them an ELR match. There's the 50 cal challenges. Like there's a lot of stuff like this. So can you give us sort of like a basic overview of like somebody who's interested in ELR? What are they looking at between all of this?
Sure, yeah. Let me reel that back. Get me going here. It's like I kind of jump far ahead. So the basics of VLR, 1 mile, and it depends on the match that you go to, but you're going to be shooting anything from maybe a cold board just under 1,000 at 1,000, and then your targets are going to go out to 1,800. Some have 2,000, 2,100, 2,400. I think there's one match that has like a 3,000 yard target each year, but most of them are right around 2,000 yard max, and you have a 338 caliber restriction. So your bullet, it doesn't matter how big the case is, your bullet needs to be 338 and smaller. Your gun ready to go, everything that's on it, aside from suppressor, needs to weigh 26 pounds or less. And I know the setup that I run for that is a pretty extreme. It's the second fastest 338 you can shoot. It's just under 33 XC, and I shoot that just to be different. But if you're a beginner, I always tell everybody to go 300 Norma and shoot 250 grain A tips. Get yourself some N570 powder, maybe some N568. I love N568, but in that case, you'll get about 70, 80 feet per second more out of N570, but it's a touch more temp sensitive. 28 to 30 inch barrel, get yourself a good scope, whether it's a Vortex, a Burris XTR, or a Night Force, because those distances they all track pretty well. When I say track, I'm talking about your accuracy within your clicks. Uh, put it in an MDT chassis, or like if you're trying to do something really simple, the setup is not extremely expensive. A chamber job is not extremely expensive. You're using like a Defiance Tenat or Defiance Deviant tactical action, and that's an easy way to get started. That's an easy rig for 2 mile stuff. That's whenever your jump really happens. You can do it with a factory gun. There's a handful of factory guns out there, but I know why they're that expensive, because of the manufacturing aspect. To buy an off the shelf gun, I mean, even semi mass production the way they are, that stuff's expensive to do. So getting a one off rig or something you do find used, you just need to know who built it, and you need to really kind of know who owned it and how they treated it, what type of loads they ran to ensure that they're not burning it out too fast. Um, but yeah, the 1 mile or the 1 mile is pretty easy. 2 mile, you start at 1,500, I think, minimum, and you go out to two, beyond two. Some targets are 37, 3,800 yards, but the rigs are completely different. I don't know if you want me to dive into some of those basics or.
I definitely want to talk a little bit about cost point on this. And then maybe we can save this for a little bit later, but I'm hearing like rumors or rumblings that there might be a King of 3 Mile at some point. Um, I don't know if that's true, right? But I hear that that's what people are looking at. But let's talk about a little bit about cost point, right? Because I've had quite a bit of opportunity to see what custom built rifles look like at the highest level for every discipline, and sort of like in my 2 Mile is probably the only one that I haven't like really talked to people about, but they're fairly similar, the cost wise. Um, has that been your perspective, or can you tell us a bit about like if you want to do a custom build, right? And in my opinion, I often find if you have the right tooling at your house already, doing custom builds are cheaper than getting something from a manufacturer where you're paying an upcharge because they're doing all of the work for you and things like that. So what does that look like?
So when it comes to a barrel, just that's your key component, right? So a barrel blank itself is going to run you anywhere between 800 and $1,000, depending on who you ask to machine it. Is going to be anywhere between 500 and $1,200. I know some machine jobs get very expensive, and if you want it fluted, like I have a series of barrels that we fluted in 2023 because at the time the suppressor was part of the weight. Now it's not, but there's only a few of us that use them. And the other branded suppressors are 8 pounds, where mine's 4, and I can get into that later. But we fluted the barrel. That flute job, 6 straight flutes on a barrel that size is $800. And so, like, you look at how much machine time and just that barrel, and depending on which cartridge you're using, it's 800 shots.
Mm,
And so you have a couple grand in, I don't know, 4 months, 6 months,
mhm,
depending on how long it takes you to get a blank. You got to have a second barrel ready to go. So my rule of thumb, and this is what I tell people all the time: if you're going to shoot ELR, it's just like my spotter last year, King. He won King in 2023 with a 375 shot tech. That's what I would preach day in, day out. I've had my daughter when she was 11 years old. I had her shoot one with a muzzle brake, and she thought it was the most heinous thing because a lot of dust, debris, and I love suppressed weapons. And I said, okay, try with a suppressor on it. Totally fine. And that's what I've been selling a lot of the KGM R50s, KGM technology suppressors to shooters, not for them, for their wives.
mm,
And they won't want to touch that 375. And it doesn't, 375 is kind of like the smallest entry. But for consistency, I can give you loads right now, grab a gun, take you to an event, and as long as there's not more than a minor mental mistake, you will get rounds on target, every single target. Just because of the bullet profiles we have in the Kestrel now, it is like the turnkey, like race car, if you will. Something you go on the showroom, take it to the racetrack, have blast, and then drive it home. The 375 shot tech can do that. So I would say that's your entry level. When it comes to the chassis, Terry Dimes with Fusion Pro shooting systems, that's what I use. There's a bunch of shooters that use it because it's adjustable. It's just rock solid. And I don't think I've ever had to readjust once assembled. So readjust is in need to add weight, or I need to shift weight, or even retorque everything's stayed torqued. So that chassis will be, I think they're $1,800, $1,900. So from a chassis perspective, light gun, heavy gun, it's almost the same cost point.
mm,
The barrel is where your significant expense comes in. The action, use a Pierce Engineering 10X. Depending on which tactical action you get for a light gun, that cost is almost the same. Okay, scopes, same scopes, pretty much across the board. When it comes to a muzzle brake or a suppressor, yeah, you could have increased costs with a suppressor because there's very few that can handle that. And I will say that there's only one that is consistent as far as repeatability.
mhm,
But the loading, because now you're double, triple the cost every bullet you send downrange. You're using with a shot tech, you're using 70% more powder than you would in like a big 338. Primers, you're using large rifle magnum primers, so that's the same. The brass cost is probably twice. So to transition over to it, the cost point is not super significant. It's just a little bit. The you may need a new press, which is $200-300. So, but I say this with all sincerity to anybody: if you're shooting light gun, I think the difference between light gun and heavy gun, 1 and 2 mile, you need to be on your game for high impact percentages, and you need to know all the same things. But when it comes to heavy gun, it's not that much more expensive, but it really expands your ballistic knowledge, your understanding of weather, um, the understanding of spotting, all that glass time that you need. Because once you start sending them that far, everything changes compared to 1 mile. So if you can do one, you can definitely do the other, and it just you feel like you enter a whole new world when you're shooting 2 mile.
well, that's a really good lead in to talk about 2 Mile, right? Can you tell us exactly what is King of 2 Mile, right? I think a lot of people think that it's like a competition. I've heard that the King of 2 Mile is actually like an own branded like match series that happens, and then it's also a bit confusing, I think, because there's it almost feels like King of 2 Mile should be like a singular event, but there's multiple events that are happening through the year. Um, yeah.
Okay. Let me try to unbox this. So a few years ago, my basic understanding was these ELR matches could have certain formats, but almost everyone at that time, every single match director did it under the King of 2 Mile point scoring, which is a formula. So if you would shoot a match in Southern Virginia or Georgia, they were usually 50-round matches. You shot 10 targets 5 times, and you did that usually in 2 relays. I'm trying to make sure I don't skip too far ahead. So the King of 2 Mile match itself, King of 2 Mile I believe it's an LLC. It's an organization. It's a legal
Mhm.
functioned entity, and it is a branded entity. Um, I know a bunch of the folks involved. I don't know exactly what their titles are. Eduardo, he travels a lot promoting it, and if you look across the world, there's a handful of King of 2 Mile authorized matches or endorsed, if you will. So our King of 2 Mile Global Finals in Raton, New Mexico, every single year tries to bring the best of the best around the world. It always has. And that format is a little bit different than a normal shoot your 2 relays, this many targets, 5 rounds per target. It's a it's for the serious competitor, and I see a lot of reason behind it. You now get a cold war target. It's worth I don't even know what the point value is. It's worth points, not significant, but I treat that at any match. If I get a cold war target, oh my goodness, that's what sets the tone. It helps you so much because it helps you bridge what you think you know, what you're seeing, what you studied. But then you have 4 qualifying targets, and this I believe the same goes for 1 mile as well. So keep that in mind. This qual process is for both, because this is where you put your feet to the fire. Those 4 targets are hit to continue. You have 12 shots. If you shoot at your first target 3 times and you do not hit it, you must shoot until you hit it, and then you can move on. If you've impacted after your third shot, it is worth no points. So if you shot it on your fifth shot, no points, but you can move on. And what that does is it reduces your round count for later on because you must shoot at each target 3 times. So ideally, if you go 1-1-1-1, you're good. You didn't burn any rounds, as we like to say. But as my spotter professional hunter in South Africa found out, he got to the first target and he started shooting around it because the way we turned, and I had it in the kestrel, and he started pulling. He started. It wasn't he was jerking the trigger. He was a little frustrated at the cold bore target because we thought we'd get it, and he started moving his shoulder a little bit. He ended up burning rounds. He burned 2. Well, hit it on the fifth, so he burned 1 and then a second. So now he's going into it the rest of the relay. He cleans the second target. It's like great. And then we have to take a break for the second relay. How many shots did he have left? He can't shoot them all at the far target. So he only got rounds on T3 and nothing on T4. So if you play out all those scenarios of hit to continue, 3 shots on target, and that you will see guys have good days and bad days. It could be the smallest thing. I know my first year at King, I had to burn 1 shot, but I made up for it. I barely missed qualification, and that was kind of a drive to. It's like, hey, every shot is important, but nothing is better than your next shot because you can't do anything about the shots you already fired. So my last 2 King of 2 Mile, like King of 2 Mile Global 24, I went 1-2 and 2-3, 1-1, and that was a pretty good score. Obviously I qualified, but what you're learning through that is that's whenever you can get nervous. I'm not really nervous in those aspects. I just know that I need to get rounds on target. and with variable weather conditions, I think that format is what challenges everybody. Because you'll hear anybody say anything about their round. Their weather could have been different. The wind could have shifted, and I've seen it. I've seen friends, and it feels like your friends getting beat to death whenever they're chasing a target, and just because that's what happens.
Mhm.
Now, once you've qualified, depending on how many they take, depending on which king it is, you go to finals. And finals is three targets, and they usually are 2,700 and change, 3,100 and change, and then something around 2 miles. When I say around, it's 2 miles or beyond. Like in South Africa, it was 35.78. 5 shots each, but it's still hit to continue. So if you don't get something within your first 5 shots on the first target, you guys start burning rounds. And the same thing happens. So you have less rounds to shoot at that 2 mile, or maybe you burn them all. Maybe you shoot all of your 15 shots at that one target. And unfortunately, that does happen. And it happens for various reasons. Rifle, the competitor doing something as far as their shooting mechanics, etc. So that's the basic format of what King of 2 Mile itself is, and it's a legal entity. It's in a handful of countries, and I think that that's what everybody looks up to. There's a few new uh, things that have popped up. BLR USA Nationals is becoming a big one, and the scoring format's a little bit different. A lot of people like it. Uh, I think that as far as ELR as a whole, there's all sorts of matches out there. Um, you got to travel a little bit to find them. I know Trent said on your last podcast with ELR, the East Coast, we don't have 2 mile targets. We just, the way the terrain development, we don't have the wide open spaces, just from a geographical perspective. So if you do live somewhere, take the drive, go do it. Everybody will help you. Everything that was said previously about the atmosphere, it's great. And if you can get to King, I think that they open it up to 100 shooters as long as you're not a rookie, and you can go now. So it's, and there's a side match there too. So you're shooting essentially two matches. But yeah, I encourage anybody to get involved um, in the format. Make sure you understand the format. That's the thing. And some people are against it, some people are for it, but I don't think there's any other way to test um, a competitor other than my last match. They did change the format just a little bit in South Africa that made it super interesting. And that hit to continue, you got to be on your A game, because even if you do burn a shot, it's fine if you burn one or two, because you never know what's going to happen to the next person. I mean, 20-mile-an-hour winds could pick up, and that person not hit anything. They could be one of the shooters in the world.
So so this format, do you guys have a world championship then, and is it under the King of 2 Mile?
So, King of 2 Mile Global Finals is in Raton, New Mexico. That is what the World Championships, I would say, are to be. I mentioned the USA ELR USA Nationals that has come up. I would consider that equal. Um, Not all of those same folks came to King, and I was unfortunately unable to go to that one just because of scheduling. I mean, I live on the East Coast, so it's, man, to do 4 or 5 matches. I only did 2 matches this year. I only did one match last year, but in 2023 I shot six. So it becomes very difficult to travel. You're putting all your apples in a cart for 2 matches in a year, depending on how far you got to travel. So the prep time and make sure you do all the right things is pretty key. It's not like you can just go do it every weekend. Some people can that live um, in the center part of the country, but the King and ELR USA Nationals, those are the top shooters. Those are where we go to compete to see who's the best. The series event at Spear Point, that's a huge thing. Spear Point does a monthly match, and I know there's a lot of folks that live, I don't know, geographically within 12 hours of there, and they shoot really regularly, and it is really competitive. Those conditions are, from what I've seen, absolutely nuts. I've only shot in something similar, and that was only recently in South Africa. I really want to get to at least one of those, but the guys that do that for the series and do well at that, I regard those individuals like David Lindsay. David Lindsay's a great shot. He goes there. I don't know how long it takes him to get there because he lives in Arkansas. But him and Curtis Roman, they're friends, peers, mentors of mine. They go and shoot that all the time, and they usually do pretty well. But they even have the days where the wind is just done X, Y, and Z, or something that has occurred that happens to all of us. So that series is probably the top series in the country. The two events that test you the most are King of 2 Mile and Raton, and then ELR USA Nationals, which has a location change this year, and it's the second year of it. But those two would be the biggest ones, and you could
Okay.
have people that say that, well, this is the championship, and this is the championship, and but those two are the biggest ones.
I got you. So that sort of leads us into the reason we're here, right? Your competition background. You have quite a bit of accomplishments under your belt. You just had a very big win. So I'd love to sort of dive into that. Talk about that and then your most recent experience.
So the competition started where I dedicated almost a full year to traveling, and I asked the at the time who's become a good friend now, Vince Shelton, to shoot with me. And I said, hey, I'm going to build the guns. We're going to go shoot 5, 6 events, some in the East Coast, and then we're going to shoot um, Conquer the Castle, which is one of my favorite events just because of the venue. The venue is great. I always enjoy my time there. And I said, we're going to do Kink. And at that point, because I was such a new shooter, I wasn't globally ranked. And the rules at the time to go to King is you had to be in the top 100, or you could join somebody as a spotter in the top 100 and you got kind of grandfathered in. And that's what I did because Vince was in the top, I think, 30 at that time. And the ranks haven't come out for about a year. So I'm not sure where he is now. So I kind of rode on his coattails. And that was intended. I'm like, if I shoot 3 or 4 events and I can't get qualified myself up to this point, then fine. But here's the thing: is I told you that I've done pretty well from a placing standpoint, and this is where it gets kind of dicey and is super frustrating. So for your ranking, it's based on your score and the distance of the last target that you've impacted twice. So you could have this super stellar match, like my match in South Africa. That score doesn't count because I had one target, I only had one impact on. So back that up, I had these great finishes. I was getting like second and third, and I got sixth at Castle my first time. The first time I ever shot out the 2 miles, the very first match, I got sixth place, and Vince got third. We were beyond ecstatic because it's like, man, we can mathematically do this. Everything translates from our guns to the Kestrels. It's perfect. We can go anywhere and do this. Well, I look and I'm like, man, I'm still not ranked. Why is this? And every time I would compete, I'd always have a target that would screw me up. I would put 3 on target, 4 on target. And the further it didn't even have to be a far target, it'd be the second target. There was always one target that I wouldn't get that second round on. So my ranking never, I think I was 170th. And so then that's when the goal kind of was set where I didn't know if it was my loading. I didn't know if it was, I was thinking, God, I'm getting dispersion somewhere. This has to be a problem, or it's me. My shooting mechanics are wrong. So what is wrong with me? So I didn't have any goal as far as other than let's go and win or try to win. Let's hit the targets. That was just the mindset. Let's go and hit targets. And that's a fine mindset to have. But when you start doing it and you start setting goals, even mentally, like you may not set out like, yeah, I want a certain hit percentage, or I want this trophy, or like whatever you want. What is the increment to get you there? What is the smallest form to get you there? And Vince was, we talked extensively about mental mindset, and he's like, "Do you think you're gonna win?" And Vince is a pretty quiet guy. And I was like, are we going to get philosophical on this, or are we going to tap into psychology or something? Because this is not. Vince is a great dude, but this shocked me. He's like, well, I read this book, and I'm like, I just was taken back. I'm like, read this book on what? And it was a winner's perspective, and I actually have it. I had the same book, and I've always had it as like a I've also reference. I've never read it front to back, but it's the mindset that I've always had with certain things that when I go in to do it, I'm going to do my best and I'm going to win. Now, getting there, breaking down how to get there is this was one of the first times after that incident of not being ranked going into King the first year was I need to do better at what? And I need to be more consistent on target. So after 2023 and going into 24, that's when I really knew what the key was is to get ranked. And yes, placing well is one thing, but then getting through it and making sure you get better at what you do and you score better and you get those wins, you're getting solid wins win after win, is that hit percentage. And what was it? And what it was for me is two things. It was one thing whenever I aligned to the gun, is I do take a very traditional canted lower torso and sniper approach, but then how I approach the gun and how I stay in the gun. And the other thing was neck tension consistency. So those are probably the two biggest things. The last one would be kestrel trimming because that has changed so much with every update. And now I can pick up a brand new kestrel. I can put in. You could tell me a gun. You could say, "Hey, Richie, I have a 300 PRC with 230 grain A tips." I'm like, "Okay," and I'll punch it all in, and just based on maybe a couple shots at a 1,200-yard target, we're ready to go. As long as your loads are 6 or 7 SD or less.
Mhm. So talk a bit about some of the significant wins you've had, right? Or some of the significant placings you've had and how that sort of led into the South Africa match that you were at.
So I mentioned that castle one just because that was May of 23, so 2 years and change ago. It's not that far ago, but it feels like a long time ago. And getting sixth place, and Vince, who's much more experienced shooter than myself, he shot PRS. Um, that was that was huge. So going into the other matches, it was still that same thing. It was like the high finish and but the spotting, like able to see and understand and seeing bullets hitting different types of dirt, hitting rocks, and what it looks like, and the winds and the websites and all the things. But when it came to 2024, life got really busy, and I was pretty much only gonna have time for King. I was like, as the year progressed, I had to cancel a couple of trips, which sucked. And then it was like, all right. So I talked to Josh, who Vince, Josh, and I are friends, and Josh said he wanted to go back. And I was like, yeah, you definitely need to go back to defend your title. And Vince couldn't make it because of other things, so that's how we planned it. Was, hey, we're 2024 is just me, Josh, and his wife Laura came with us, and it was one of the best trips. Just they're great friends, they're great people, and all of that road time. I mean, it's 24-hour drive to get out there, and I learned more then, I think, than the year prior. Just that one trip, just because we had issues with the Kestrel, and I don't. The Kestrel wasn't wrong. It was the bullet profiles seemed like they changed a little bit, and I don't know if it was the updates or whatever it was. My PDM performance drag model wasn't working right, and I learned how to fully. I think I fully understand the Kestrel now. And Josh and I sat up for 5 hours one night because I sent a bullet that was almost a mil over a 2,500-yard target. And the only reason we knew where that was in practice is Laura actually saw it. She's like, I think you hit the tree. And I'm like, the tree that's on the rock above that target. So once we adjusted that and got to shoot real time in the side match called the King's Gambit, I did horrible at the first three targets. And I was very dejected. And I usually don't take things super hard like that, but I only have one impact in 15 shots. And I'm like, this is not right. Something's wrong. What do we need to change? And in between the second relay, we went through and we started making our changes. And I went in that second relay and I went from second to last place to taking third. And I'm like, okay, I think I figured this out. And so we went over the data and we compared it to other guns. And there was something that significantly changed because all of my data was more than a mil different progressively downrange. But I went with it. I just was like, all right, let's just go with it. And we went into quals. We both qualled well, and everything was consistent then. So we got through with the win. It was great because there were so many people stacked at the top, so it really did matter about your finals performance. And I was the only one to get 2 shots on each target. A few other guys had a shot or two at the 2 mile on plate, which was, I don't know if it was the highest year for impacts on the 2 mile plate, but I think it's pretty close. So that win right there was much needed on many levels because I feel like I'd worked hard, did as much as I could, and even with some of the changes, I was able to learn. Hey, don't sit here and complain that something's not working right, and that's not a philosophy I've ever had, even when it comes to building guns or anything else. I'm like, what is it? Let me understand it. And once I started understanding it, depending on the profile that you pick for whatever bullet, adjust it to your gun because all of those curves, all of those ballistic curves can be adjusted depending on the bullet. So moving into 2025, I was like, all right, I want to get back to Castle. I really like shooting there. And I'll talk about that event first before I go into the next. So we get there. I'm like, I have this down. It's down to a system, and my loads are 2 SD across 15 shots. So I mean, I've shot lower. I have a couple ones in the book at the range, but 2SD is solid every time. And I attribute that to the Warner Tooling dies that I use and the Can-Am Arbor press. So I'm able to see every single one what the seating pressure is, and if it's not within 10 psi, it goes into a different group of ammo. That way, whenever I shoot a match, I have the same seating pressure on all 50 of those shots. That's why I don't run a chrono at all, because I know exactly what they're going to shoot. So with Castle going there, and Vince brought his 50, which I thought was interesting because this was a gentleman that also didn't want to shoot something that big. And he cleans the first target, puts 2 on the second, and blanks the third. It was a little more windy. I go up there and I only go 111. And I'm like, what in the world? Yes, I know that the wind is playing with us a little bit, but I had to go back into it and we had to make another change. And we both had to do it because there's a lot of people that were falling in front of that third target. So we made our adjustments, but Vince said that he was going to go on the shyer side where I went on the more aggressive side. So when we went into the second relay to shoot, which is essentially finals there, and it's 3,100, 3,400, and 3,800 yard targets. Very windy. And I fired my first shot. And as soon as I lifted my bolt and went to pull back, I knew something was wrong. And I thought that I've never had, I've only split a case a couple times intentionally to see how much I could take. But I pulled back and I felt no pressure. And I was like, oh God. I looked in, I saw the shell, and I'm like, I need a rod. I jumped up, didn't tell anybody to stop time, which I could have. I think people were confused that I'm running around like an idiot. I need a rod to get this case out. Well, apparently my extractor decided it didn't want to participate in this match anymore because it just wasn't there. I don't know what happened. And thankfully, a good buddy, Dwayne Russell, he had to rod out every single empty shell without touching my rifle, which was because that's a rule. Nobody else can touch your rifle, but rodding it out is fine. And I got another one on another target, but I only had time to shoot 2 shots at the 3,800. And this target is my arch nemesis. It is the only plate at 2 miles or beyond I've never touched. And that drives me absolutely bonkers because I have a higher than 50% impact rating on every single target beyond 2 miles, except for that one. And yeah, it's 3844. It's kind of out there. But I fired 2 shots at it and I was only a half mil off. And I like to think that that's impressive, but I learned later in that day as I was watching everybody else shoot, I saw shots that were 6 and 7 mils off down on this road that goes up to that target.
Mhm.
And these are coming from some of the best shooters I've seen since I've started. And I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And I looked at Vince, and when Vince went up to shoot, I said, hey, everybody's really low. Like something's wrong low. And I said, whatever you do, give it a little bit more. And I said, give it a mil, give it another mil or two. And when he fired his first shot, we didn't see it because it was too far left. And he fired his second shot. It was still a little bit left, but it was 3.5 mils low. This is unseasonably low or unreasonably low for all of us. Why?
Mhm.
And they're shooting 50s. I have a 416, watch 375s. We're all shooting different bullets and different cartridges, different speeds. Yes, we're all shooting in like 18-mile-an-hour winds, I think it was. That wasn't it. Because if you put in your wind in your direction, it's going to give you the proper calculation. And then I watched one of the shooters I regard most. I watched him shoot like 6 or 7 mils low as well, and they didn't even see any of them. The only reason I saw them because I was down from the firing line a little bit, and I told them. And so I think that we are all trying to understand and learn that once you get past a certain distance, that you really need to understand your kestrel and you really need to know what your bullet is going to do when it gets out there. And this is, I think, more true in lower elevations because in King of Two Mountain, New Mexico, I can't remember what the DA is. It's like the density altitude is like 90 some hundred feet. So you have a lot less elevation there. But that was another education, seeing those bullets fall out and adjusting because going into um, King of 2 Mile, South Africa, that was that was kind of daunting because it has that wind that you only hear about in Kansas, and guys are like, make sure you take your windage stop out because you're probably going to shoot 14 mils left or right or whatever. And when you look at the targets out, and it's near the crew area, the 2 mile target, just for example, it looks close based on how far that terrain goes. That's how crazy this sounds. I don't know how far it is to that one like small plateau. I want to say 8 or 9 miles, but you're looking down at a 2 degree angle, like, oh yeah, there's the 2 mile, and then you have all this territory behind it. So to watch mirage and the harder shrubbery trying to move to give you a wind call, it is exactly what I thought it would be. It is the most challenging thing that I've experienced, and I was so excited to do this trip. Just to, I mean, I had the confidence to go in there and make the adjustments I needed to, but I was a little intimidated with the conditions.
Mhm.
So everybody there leading up to it, the previous winner from 2024, he was able to just kind of give me the ins and outs. Hey, this is how the venue works. It's down this road, past here, and um, I actually borrowed it. I had to borrow his Knife Force Prism because I wasn't able to get another one in time here. And the organizers, they were very polite. Everything ran so smoothly, just like it would here in the U.S. And it was phenomenal. I thought the sub going into it was great, and then that wind set in. You get down on that firing line, and you're like, "Well, I hope I captured it right because there's a variable wind, and you have 15 miles per hour from your lowest capture to your highest capture, and then it becomes a guessing game, and then it switches on you. It switches from 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock, or 4 o'clock to 1 o'clock, and I had um, the cold bore was again what I call it's it's what sets you for the entire match. And I didn't hit it, but then I cleaned target one and target two. And here's where the variable comes in. We knew that morning that they were going to split the first relay up. As I mentioned to you, how King works, you shoot your qual. So you shoot your cold bore and your four targets. They said, well, we're going to split it. You're going to shoot your cold bore, your target one, target two, and then you're going to take a break. We're going to do a new firing order. Then you're going to shoot three and four. So I cleaned one and two, and I got one on each three and four, which I was fine with. I was like, hey, if we're gonna shoot in some weather, let's shoot in some weather. Everybody's got to do it. It's not like I was the only person doing it, or us five guys were singled out. Everybody did it. Most people did well their first two targets, and then we all did mediocre on our second two because of conditions. Now going into finals, I was only in first place by a couple thousand points, which is nothing when it comes to the point system. And I took my what I thought was my best win call and everything. I'm going in, I'm confident. And I fired that first shot out to 2,500, well, it's 2,500 meters, 2,700 yards. And in a very nice South African accent, I heard my spotter say, "You're very far left, sir." Which, if we were here in America, that would have been some expletives of,
Mhm.
holy, you're way over there. I milled it out in my scope. I measured it. And I was like, how did I screw up that bad? Like, that was, I don't even my 12-year-old daughter would probably say that she could do far better than that. That was bad. And I looked and I'm like, how did I do that? Because you don't have trees out there. So I know Trent highlighted like trees and vegetation, but you don't have trees, you have harder shrubs. You can see mirage, but nothing else. You feel you're feeling on your face what's going on. And I was so confused. So I had to take a lot of that left out of it. But I didn't want to take enough out of it because I was scared of it. I was scared that, oh, great, I'm going to take however much out of this shot and it's going to dump on the right side of the target. So I took some out. I fired the second round and it was still a little bit left. Not too bad where I would have expected my first one to go. And I dialed it again. I gave it another correction. I'm like, all right, don't go too far. And I fired that one. I was still left. And I'm like, I can feel the wind changing on my face. I can see that my bullets are now going where I want them to, but I should have an impact by now. The fourth shot was an impact. And I was like, okay, there it is. And I sent the fifth round as fast as I could. It dumped a mill right at the target. So going from the worst win call of my life, when I think I'm going to have the best, to walking bullets in and then thinking I have it, the wind shifts and sends me a whole mill to the right. I've never ever had that happen. If you have a firearm, rifle, whatever it is, and you start getting inconsistencies like that at any distance, you think, oh, well, geez, that something was wrong with that load, the neck tension, the speed. I don't know what the speed was, but like I said, I don't run a chrono because I know how consistent those guns are. So it was a little bit confusing, and so I just took it to the next target. I moved on. I carried the direction. I changed my kestrel at that time. I carried the direction over, and I made the adjustments, and I went 2, 3, 5 for impacts. And so I was like, all right, now I think I got it. But now I got to swing back the other direction. And if you have huge swings when it comes to 1 or 2 mile, it doesn't really matter. If you have huge swings in directions, you just change so much. Not only is it degree of fire, but now you've changed your wind direction and your speed, depending on the variable of speed, it changes everything. So I took the two, and if you there's a video of the whole run on the King of 2 Mile South Africa page. A lot of people were like, "Man, you shot slower than I've ever seen you shoot." Well, that's because it was making those adjustments to get that shooting solution, and I didn't really care about how much time I took because one round on target doesn't necessarily matter as far as points. It's about, hey, I want to make sure I get this right and not chase. And so I made the correction and like I got this. And I said first, second, and third round impacts at 2 miles. And the fourth and fifth was because it was changed in the direction just slightly. They fell, I don't know, a foot in front of the target. We saw both of them. It was like, oh, it's just right there. But that win was I felt very solid. It was the hardest I've ever had to work for any match because it was constant change. And when you think you knew what was going on, it would change on you. And it was a little bit confusing with some of the directions, but it was one of the most fun matches just because of the challenge and the variables. And again, the people were great. Just the venue, everything. I can't say enough about it.
And you won this match, correct?
Yes,
Yes. And you in 2024 or 2024 you also won King of 2 Mile out in Raton, right?
correct. So I'm the King of 2 Mile 2024 Globals and the King of 2 Mile 2025 South Africa.
So does that, like, if the rankings were out, would that make you number 1? Or
No,
sort of?
so
No?
uh, no, so I was the rankings. I mean, they are important. Some people look at them, some people don't, because they have opened it up. But I went to look at it, and it dawned on me I only hit that target 5 one time in South Africa. So that's where my score stops for ranking is the target before that.
Mhm.
And I'm like, man, if I would have got a second rounder on that, that would have put me because of distance, which was 35.78, and because of points, which was 117,000 points. So if the rankings come out today, you'll see I'm still in third for my King of 2 Mile score in 2024
Mm.
because I had at least two shots on the target.
what a weird scoring system where you can win these matches and not not be number one.
Yeah, and I get it because I don't want to cause any fluff, but some will say that it doesn't matter what distance that you hit a target at unless you hit it a second time.
Mm,
And I would say on my hardest days, could you give me 5 shots and I could hit a target at any distance? Maybe. I'm pretty confident I probably could. Out to I don't even know how far because I've shot a 4260 before and I did everything but hit that thing, dancing all around it. I don't know. I don't know if that was one variable or whatever. If it was me, I'll shoot it again this year or shoot at it. But I think that that's why they have that 2 shot rule on a 5 round target because how if you look at how many people have hit a target at a really far distance, but didn't have the follow up shot, just like that's my South Africa performance. Hey, that's the rule, and I stand by it. I had to go back and read it just to be sure, as I'm like, but I put two on everything else, and I get it. So you that one I didn't have that second round there, so it's like, hey, that's where it stops, and it is what it is. But that's what makes you more consistent. You go to a 50 round match, you put two on every target. That's a great accomplishment. That should be
mhm.
your first goal as an ELR shooter is hit every target, 2 shots every target, 3 shots every target. Let's clean 2 plates out of 10, and then that's how you work up in your goals, and your loading, how you load your ammo. That's the I mean that's how it gets you there is your solid loading ability, mechanics, and then set your target goals. Literally the target goals.
I got you. So a bit of a technical question, just I'm just curious. I know there's a lot of emphasis placed on cold bore hits. Do you see any like significant shifting in your impacts from your cold bore to your first or second or third shot? I mean, I know like you guys aren't sending a ton of rounds down, but I know you're running fairly hot. Do you see impact shifts on that?
So are you talking about like impact shifts like leading to the term dispersion?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I have a picture. I think you may saw the picture of the 2 mile target, the South Africa match.
Mhm.
So I think
There.
they were 18 inches apart, all three of them, or 18 inches from the furthest to not. And I use that as my example. So I want one, two, three. I don't know how you can get them any tighter than that at that distance. I'm happy with that. I'm happy with 2 impacts. But 4 and 5 were dumped right in front of the target. And I think it's a 7.5 second flight time out to that target. So you're waiting, 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 waiting. And to see a little poof of dirt, and I asked the scorers later on, I said, hey, on camera, how close was that? And they were like, a foot. So if you look at those 5 shots and what the gun is doing, that gun is absolutely phenomenal. It you could shoot it. I do run 100 yard zero. I mean, it's one hole. Then you go out to I think I grouped it at 1,000, and I can't remember what the group size was. It was pretty small, 5 shots. And the further you get, if you start seeing that you can't get impact or multiple impacts, you're likely having dispersion. And it can be as technical as the barrel. So something in the barrel can be your shots just aren't as consistent. I do believe that load pressure, or excuse me, seating pressure and neck tension are going to be the other factor in there. But for the guys that are running chronos or you're testing your rifles, you should see that. So if you have a round that's 15 feet per second faster and you're shooting a plate at 2,500 yards, it doesn't matter your wind direction because now you've just pushed that round faster. So it's going to be at a significantly different place. And again, I'll reference Trent again because I didn't want to double tap what he was saying. If you have more than 10 feet per second in your round, and say you have no dispersion, say you could shoot the tightest group, 10 feet per second just means you just went over the target.
Mhm.
I mean, if you 10 feet per second under, now you're in front of the target. That is just a variable. Take away like, oh, I could shoot straight. when it comes to the dispersion of opening and it's inconsistent, I think that the first thing that you can control is your neck tension and your seating pressure. But then if it continues and you know that you're shooting, I don't know, one SDs, two SDs across 10 shots, then look into the barrel. Maybe something happened in the rifling process or something like that. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen even like a touch of warping. I saw a very reputable, like a high output custom manufacturer 300 Win mag that was zinging bullet, supposedly 0 to 100 yards, throw 120 yards in the dirt, throw 40 yards in the dirt. And it wasn't that it was the bullet wasn't stable, it's because the barrel was technically warped. You couldn't see it. But once I got in the shop, put it on lasers because the guy had asked me for help. I was like, man, I'd never seen a barrel that was like literally warped
Mm.
and had a curvature to it. And I was like, wow. So yeah, for dispersion, the two basic things you can control, but you should have consistent impacts. If you do your cold bore and you make an impact, you better send them because don't let the conditions change on you. And if your gun's on, you're going to clean that plate.
Well, you've definitely given us a lot to think about. I think anyone who's interested in learning more about ELR, you would be a great resource. I do want to give the opportunity. I know you're not a big social guy, but I know you do have a Facebook as well as I would imagine a business account somewhere, website or something if people want to work with you. Do you want to throw those out for people that way they have a way to contact you?
Yeah, we're actually got to the point where we're not taking firearm orders right now. So va-silentarsenal.com. If you're a shooter and you have some questions, just go ahead and send me a message on Facebook. I'm pretty open, candid. I get to it when I can. But the people I work with are probably the most important, and it's a select few because I don't. I think I mentioned in my email I don't use a ton of products that are out there, and want to tell shooters don't always go and chase the next best thing or the coolest gadget or gizmo. I think I told you I used a $10 rear bag for that match that I grabbed out of the back of a truck,
Hmm.
and as long as it's solid. So I mean, I use Night Force scopes, cutting edge bullets, Lilja barrels. I can't say enough about the Lilja barrels. I don't know how many we've gone through. We've gone through and shot out because they are so great. Our chassis systems, which is Fusion Pro shooting systems by Terry Dines, those things are just rock solid and they're totally adjustable as far as depending on your scope mount height. You saw my rifle, I have to use a really tall scope mount because I use a suppressor. So Terry spent about 6 hours working on that to do all that math because he's never made one that big before and it was perfect right out of the gate. KGM suppressors, as we talked about before, first suppressor rifle, the Wing King, and it just keeps hammering. So when it comes to having a suppressor or not, it just makes the shooting experience so much better. So spend the extra money, get the suppressor. It can handle it. There's no cons to having the suppressor other than having a taller scope mount. Um, the DNA, my ammo to travel, DNA custom engraving, that is super key. Their cases are, I don't know if they're bulletproof. I've never shot one, but they're they're sealed. They're perfect. Their graphics are great. But I mean, if I can go from here, travel to South Africa, my humidity in my shop was completely different. The weather here was 100 degrees outside. I go there and it's 35 in the morning and I'm cold. It feels like November in Virginia. And I pull everything out and I did chrono my I shot a couple shots at a farm we were at and it was 5 feet per second less, which is typical for that atmospheric change. So their cases kept everything safe. And then the folks that are involved as far as the matches and the community, it's really difficult to find areas to do this. I don't care where in the world you're going. And you said that you're going to start traveling to something. You said you're going to Raton next month.
I'm traveling to the World Rimfire, and then I'll be
Oh,
over doing the European F Class Championship for that. But I'm planning on ELR is on my target for next year to travel to, if not one, at least two events.
yeah, you'll see a difference in the you see a lot of different types of disciplines, but to put these matches on, have them run solid, just like any match, there's a lot that goes into it. And so I thank all the folks in the different ELR shooting organizations, King of 2 Mile, here and abroad. It's a wonderful experience. I absolutely love doing it, and I encourage anybody who wants to set aside some time to do it. It is very rewarding and a very relaxed atmosphere.
Well, I appreciate it. I love that. Hopefully, you guys saw some value in what we're talking about. And again, if you guys have any information or any questions, feel free to reach out. We can get you connected, or you can reach out to Richie. We'll make sure to have that information in the bio. Thank you guys for being on. Give a like, give a comment, give a share. And if you guys have a chance, get out to the range, take a shot, and we will see you next time.